I am Brenda. My life took a drastic change when I became 17 years old. Permit me to describe my family to you. From the outside, we looked very good. Mom stayed at home and Dad worked non-stop. Amy, my younger sister, was 12 years my senior. Dad worked for a company owned by my maternal grandmother as a huge store manager. Grandmother was a true achiever. She began with a chain of laundromats before branching out to produce laundry detergents and household chemicals. When she made the decision to retire, she offered Mom the firm, but she declined, so Dad stepped in and took over. Things started to get tricky at that point. I recall the day everything started to go wrong. While attempting to concentrate on my studies in my room, I heard my mother yelling at my father below. "John, you're nothing more than a loser. This is my home and my family's company. Should be thankful for letting you operate it at all." Over the following few weeks, things grew worse. There wasn't much communication between Mom and Dad, and when they did, it typically ended in yelling. Amy recognized something wasn't right even at 5, so I tried to divert her attention. Then the day arrived that would alter everything. My father was in the living room with a bag at his feet when I got home from school. "Daddy?" My voice broke. "What's happening?" He approached me and gave me a firm embrace. "My apologies, dear. I had to leave this place. It's not beneficial to anyone. I experienced difficulty breathing. However, what about Amy? How about myself?" Dad withdrew, tears still clinging to his eyes. "Never forget how much I adore you both, but affection alone isn't sufficient every time." After giving me a forehead kiss, he approached Amy, who was seeing us with wide, bewildered eyes. He bent over and gave her a firm hug. "Pumpkin, please be good for your big sister." And he was gone in an instant. With a sense of finality that left me feeling empty, the door closed behind him. An hour later, Mom arrived home. She didn't appear shocked when I told her that her father had departed. She simply nodded as though she had anticipated it. "Well done," she mumbled. "Mom, I was hearing things that I couldn't believe." "You can't really say that?" With stern eyes, she turned to face me. "Brenda, your father cheated on me. Several times. I was at my breaking point. I could hear Mom talking on the phone in her room that night as I laid in bed. She sounded happier than I had heard her in months as she laughed. I was too tired to care who she was chatting to, though I wondered. After Dad left, just when I thought things couldn't be any more confusing, Mom gave us another shocking revelation. During breakfast one morning, she declared, "I have some news. I am getting hitched. I almost choked while eating cereal. How come? It's only been 2 months since Dad left, Mom." Her hand was waved off dismissively. "Brenda, true love can sometimes come as a surprise. When you are older, you will comprehend." A week later, Robert moved in. I suppose he was all right. Tall and attractive in that unoriginal manner that makes people go, "Oh, he seems nice." But there was something about him that turned me off right away. He tried to be there for Amy, engaging in games and offering homework assistance. However, I felt as though I hardly existed. Changes were also occurring at the company in the meantime. After Dad left, Mom took over and invited Robert to work alongside her. Their constant gatherings to discuss business strategy gave the impression that they would make a solid team. It was difficult to ignore the persistent feeling that I was losing my identity in my own family, even though I attempted to concentrate on my own life, school, friends, and the typical teenage activities. When Mom and Robert revealed they were launching a new office for the business in a different city, things reached a breaking point. One evening, Mom informed me, "We're moving. The business has a great opportunity here. Robert and I have been discussing you, and we believe it could be best if you remain here." I was hearing things that I couldn't believe. "Remain in this place, without you." She hurriedly clarified, "It's just that the new house won't have much space." And your time at school is almost over. To transfer now, just before your examinations, would be absurd. It was as though I had taken a punch to the gut. So where should I reside now? In the street? Mom chastised Brenda, saying, "Don't be dramatic. Your granny will host you. She has already given her consent." I slammed the door behind me as I raced to my room. I couldn't help but think as I lay on my bed, hot tears of hurt and rage flowing down my face. When did I become such a bother to my own mother? The following few weeks passed in a whirlwind of packing boxes and heartfelt farewells. For Amy, who didn't want to part from her friends, not from me. Trying to keep a straight face for her benefit, I assisted her with packing. "Lizzie, will you come visit us?" she asked, tears welling up in her large brown eyes. I gave her a strong hug. "I will, of course, Squirt. I'm not so easy to get rid of." Grandma and I watched the moving van pull away from the porch the day they went. Mom quickly hugged me. Robert nodded clumsily, and they left, taking Amy with them. It wasn't as horrible as I had imagined to live with Grandma. In her own way, she was cool. She gave me room when I needed it, and was always there to chat with or share a cup of tea. It wasn't home, though. My 18th birthday came around more quickly than I anticipated. That morning when I woke up, I felt strange, like I should have been delighted, but all I felt was empty. Naturally, Mom called, "Dear, happy birthday." Her tone was cheerful, maybe too much. "We regret not being able to attend. It's a stressful time at work. Okay, when we visit next month, we'll celebrate." I was certain that we wouldn't. Since then, they hadn't paid each other a visit. "Yes, Mom. Sounds fantastic." Grandma went all out. She must have sensed my mood. She ordered my favorite meal, made a cake herself, and allowed me invite a few friends over. I almost forgot about everything else for a few hours. Grandma called me into her home office the following morning. My gut knotted as she got that serious look on her face. Brenda motioned to the chair across from her desk and said, "Sit down, Brenda. We must have a conversation." "Oh my God," I exclaimed. "She is ejecting me. Where should I go now?" But then she smiled, reached into her desk drawer, and pulled out a small folder. "Happy birthday, sweetheart. Open it." I did, and nearly dropped it when I realized what I was looking at. "Grandma, is this—" She nodded, her eyes twinkling. "The company is yours now, Brenda. I see potential in you, kiddo. You've got a good head on your shoulders, and I know you'll do right by the business. But Mom and Robert, they're running it now." Grandma's face hardened slightly. "They're running a branch. The main company, the heart of it all. That's yours now." I sat there, stunned. Me? Barely 18, owner of a multi-million-dollar company? It felt like a dream, or a nightmare. I don't know what to say. Grandma reached across the desk, squeezing my hand. "You don't have to say anything. Just promise me you'll give it your all." I nodded, still in shock. "I will. I promise." She sat back, satisfied. "Good. Now, I've got one more piece of advice for you, and I want you to listen carefully." I leaned in, hanging on her every word. "Call your father. There's more to that story than you know. Talk to him. Take him on as a consultant if you want, but hear him out." It took me a week to work up the courage to call Dad. We agreed to meet at a small cafe downtown. When I saw him, my heart clenched. He looked older, tired, but his eyes lit up when he saw me. There was an awkward silence. Then suddenly everything came pouring out. The divorce, Mom's remarriage, the move, Grandma's gift. Dad listened, his face a mix of emotions. When I finished, he took a deep breath. "Lizzie, there's something you need to know about the divorce." And then he told me everything. How Mom had never respected him, constantly nagging and putting him down. How she called him a loser, made him feel worthless. after one particularly bad fight. He'd gotten drunk and made the biggest mistake of his life. I cheated on her, he admitted, his voice heavy with shame. I regretted it immediately, but your mother, she used it against me, threatened to sue, to take everything. She demanded I leave, give her all the property, and leave you kids. She even wanted alimony. I sat there, stunned. This didn't sound like the mother I knew, or thought I knew. Why didn't you fight it? I asked. Dad's eyes met mine, full of sadness and love. Because of you and Amy. I didn't want you to go through a messy public divorce. I thought it would be easier this way. As we talked, I felt a weight lifting off my chest. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had my dad back. Before we left, I took a deep breath and asked, Dad, how would you feel about helping me with the company as a consultant? The smile that spread across his face was answer enough. The months flew by in a whirlwind of studying, exams, and late-night cram sessions. Before I knew it, I was standing on the stage at my high school graduation, diploma in hand. Grandma was in the audience, beaming with pride. Mom and Robert were conspicuously absent, but I'd learned not to expect much from that quarter. As summer rolled in, I threw myself into college applications with Grandma's encouragement and Dad's long-distance support. I set my sights high. When the acceptance letters started rolling in, I could hardly believe it. But the real shocker came when I got the financial aid package from my top choice. Full ride, I breathed, staring at the letter in disbelief. Grandma hooped, pulling me into a hug. I knew you could do it, kiddo. All those late nights and competitions paid off. I'd chosen to major in business management. It seemed like the smart choice, given that I now had a company to run. The idea still felt surreal, but I was determined to make Grandma proud. To celebrate my college acceptance, Grandma insisted on throwing a little party, just the two of us. Some fancy takeout and a bottle of sparkling cider. Grandma wasn't about to let me drink champagne, even if I was legally an adult now. We were halfway through our meal when the doorbell rang. Grandma frowned, clearly not expecting anyone. I'll get it, I said, putting down my fork. I opened the door and felt my stomach drop. There, looking annoyed and impatient, stood my mother and Robert. Before I could say anything, they brushed past me into the house. Mom didn't bother with pleasantries. Mother, we need to talk about the company. Now. I watched, stunned, as Mom launched into a tirade. She didn't even glance my way, didn't ask about graduation or college. It was like I wasn't even there. Why can't we access the main accounts? She demanded. And why are you blocking the transfer of capital to our subsidiary? Grandma's eyes narrowed. Because it's not your decision to make anymore, Helen. The company belongs to Brenda now. She's the one who'll decide its future and manage its finances. The room went dead silent. The tension in the room was palpable after Grandma's revelation about the company. I watched as a series of emotions flashed across Mom's face. Shock, anger, and then calculation. Suddenly, her entire demeanor changed. Brenda, sweetheart, she said, her voice soft and sickly sweet. I've missed you so much. Why don't you come live with us? I blinked, caught off guard by this sudden change. Mom stepped closer, reaching out as if to touch my arm. I instinctively stepped back. We've settled in so nicely in the new city. We have a beautiful house, and there's a room just for you. We could set up a desk, get you a new computer for your studies and work. No, Mom, I said, my voice steady. I'm happy here. I have my friends, my school, and Grandma needs me. Mom's smile faltered for a second before she rallied. Well, if that's the issue, we could always move back here. We could live in our old house just like before. Wouldn't that be nice? I shook my head. It's not about the house, Mom. It's everything. I saw the anger building in her eyes, barely contained. Before she could speak, I decided to ask the question that had been burning inside me for months. Mom, why did you really divorce Dad? She stiffened, caught off guard. Well, your father, he cheated on me. Multiple times. I was tired of it. He abandoned us for his mistress and didn't even pay alimony. That's not true, I said. Dad told me everything. There was only one time, and it was because of how you treated him. He didn't abandon us. You kicked him out, and he's been paying alimony regularly. Mom's face contorted with rage. How dare you, you ungrateful little brat. You have no right to meddle in my personal life. Everything here belongs to me, and I decide who lives where. Grandma, who had been quietly watching this exchange, finally stepped forward. Her voice was calm, but filled with a steel I'd never heard before. That's quite enough, Helen, she said. You seem to have forgotten a few key points. This house, the company, they belong to me, not you. I gave the company to Brenda because I trust her judgment far more than I trust yours right now. I think it's time for you to leave. I watched, a mix of emotions swirling in my chest, as Grandma firmly ushered Mom and Robert out of the house. The door closed behind them with a final sounding click. As we stood there, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief wash over me. I'd lost something today, the last illusions I had about my mother, but I'd gained something too. A certainty about my path forward and the knowledge that I wasn't alone on it. What now? I asked, my voice muffled against Grandma's shoulder. She pulled back, giving me a small smile. Now we get back to celebrating your college acceptance, and tomorrow we start planning for your future. Your real future, not the one your mother tried to force on you. The morning after the confrontation with Mom and Robert, I woke up to the sound of voices downstairs. Curious, I crept down the stairs and peeked into the living room. To my surprise, I saw Dad sitting on the couch, deep in conversation with Grandma. As I sat down next to them, Grandma explained why she'd called Dad over. I've been thinking about Amy, she said. Your mother, well, I'm not sure she's in the best position to care for her right now. I've suggested that your father seek custody of Amy. I felt a surge of hope. Really? Dad, are you going to do it? He ran a hand through his hair, looking both nervous and determined. Yeah, I am. It won't be easy, but Amy deserves better than what she's getting right now. I couldn't help it. I threw my arms around him. Thank you, Dad. As we pulled apart, Grandma cleared her throat. There's more, she said. I've hired a private investigator to look into your mother and Robert's affairs. Over the next few weeks, life fell into a strange new rhythm. I started my college classes, throwing myself into my studies with a determination I'd never felt before. Dad came over regularly, and we worked on rebuilding our relationship. It felt good having him back in my life. Then, about 3 weeks after that morning conversation, Grandma called us both over. Her face was grave as we sat down. The investigator's report came in, she said, without preamble. And, well, it's worse than we thought. She laid out the facts, each one hitting like a punch to the gut. Mom had been cheating on Dad for years, long before the divorce. Her affair with Robert had started while she was still married to Dad. There were hotel receipts, records of expensive gifts, all painting a damning picture. But that wasn't even the worst of it. Robert is a con man, Grandma said, her voice hard. He's done this before, seducing wealthy women, convincing them to move assets around, and then disappearing with the money. I felt sick. So when they wanted to move the company's capital, Grandma nodded. Exactly. He was planning to steal it and run. We sat in silence for a moment, each lost in our own thoughts. Finally, Grandma said that we needed to confront Mom with the truth. The meeting was set for the next day. Mom arrived at Grandma's house, looking annoyed and impatient. Her expression changed to one of surprise when she saw Dad there too. What followed was one of the most painful conversations I've ever been part of. Grandma laid out all the evidence: the affair, Robert's history of fraud, his plans to steal from the company. With each revelation, I watched my mother's face, hoping to see some sign of remorse or understanding. Instead, all I saw was denial. "This is ridiculous," Mom sputtered. "Robert loves me. He would never... You're all just jealous of our happiness." Dad tried to reason with her. "Helen, please. Look at the evidence. Think about Amy. Is this really the kind of man you want around our daughter?" But Mom wouldn't hear it. She stood up, her face flushed with anger. "I don't have to listen to this. Robert is a good man, and I trust him completely. You're all just trying to ruin my life." With that, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. As we sat there, I realized something. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of what was sure to be a long, difficult battle. But looking at Dad and Grandma, I knew I wasn't facing it alone. The next few months were a whirlwind of legal battles and emotional turmoil. Dad, with Grandma's unwavering support and her lawyer expertise, filed for custody of Amy. I tried to stay focused on my studies, but it was hard not to get caught up in the drama unfolding around me. The day of the custody hearing arrived, and I insisted on being there. The proceedings were grueling. Mom's lawyer tried to paint Dad as an absent father, but our lawyer came prepared. He presented evidence of Dad's consistent alimony payments, his attempts to stay in touch with us, and the stability of his current living situation. Then came the bombshell: the private investigator's report on Robert's fraudulent past and their plans to embezzle from the company. I watched Mom's face as the evidence was presented. She looked shocked, then angry, then lost. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. When the judge announced his decision, granting Dad full custody of Amy, I felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief that Amy would be safe. Sadness that it had come to this. As we left the courthouse, Amy in Dad's arms, Mom approached us. "This isn't over," she hissed, her eyes blazing with fury. Grandma stepped between us. "Yes, Helen, it is. Go home." The hits kept coming for Mom after that. The judge ordered her to pay child support to Dad for Amy. It was a reversal that clearly shocked her. She'd always assumed she'd be the one receiving support, not paying it. I threw myself into my studies and learning about the company, trying to distance myself from the ongoing drama. But it was hard to ignore the satisfaction I felt when I heard that Robert had left Mom, running off with another woman and a significant chunk of Mom's personal savings. It was a crisp autumn evening when Dad called me, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. "Your mother showed up at my place today," he said. "She wanted to reconcile. Said she'd made a mistake, that she wanted us to be a family again." My heart clenched. Part of me, a small, childish part, wanted him to say yes, wanted our family back the way it used to be. But I knew too much now. We'd all been through too much. "I told her no," Dad said firmly. "I told her that ship had sailed a long time ago and that I wouldn't put you or Amy through that again." I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "Good," I said, surprised by the strength in my voice. "You deserve better, Dad. We all do." After a moment, Dad resumed talking, and this time, I could hear the smile in his voice. "When did you get so wise, Lizzie?" I laughed, and for the first time in months, I felt light. I learned from the best. After hanging up, I took a quick glance around my room. At Grandma's residence, there was a pile of company reports on the desk next to my textbooks. The bulletin board smiled back at me from photos of me with Dad and Amy. A year ago, this was not the life I had planned for myself. It was real, even though there were still a lot of unknowns and difficulties to overcome. I owned it. I contemplated Mom, all alone at last after all her deceit and deception. Though it was overpowered by a sense of justice, I felt a twinge of sympathy. She had to deal with the fallout from the decisions she had made. For my part, I had a loving family, a business to manage, and an exciting future. Even if it wasn't the route I had anticipated, as I stood on the verge of my new existence, I understood something crucial. When you're balancing a multi-million-dollar company with college, time flies. I was immersed in textbooks and financial reports halfway through my degree before I realized it. Weekday classes and late-night study sessions passed in a whirl. Weekends, however, were sacred. I used to pack my luggage and go home to Dad and Amy every Friday. "Lizzie!" Amy would squeal and throw me a hug as soon as I entered. She had a lot of energy and gangly limbs when she was 10. Dad would come out of the kitchen with his apron on most of the time. "Just in time for dinner," he would smile. Those weekends turned into my compass. Together, we would dine, with Amy chatting on about school, and Dad and I talking about the company. We used to frequently stay up late discussing company strategy after Amy went to bed. We would typically spend Sundays at Grandma's. Her cooking would fill the home with the aroma of roast chicken and apple pie as she cooked nonstop. We used to sit on the porch after lunch and talk about everything and nothing. Grandma would squeeze my hand and say, "I always knew you had it in you, Brenda." I experienced a mixture of anxiety and excitement as graduation drew near. As promised, Dad managed the business expertly and set me up for success. One evening, he informed me, "I'm ready to hand over the reins whenever you are." I gave him a strong hug. "I'm grateful, Dad, for everything." Not everything in life was ideal. There were obstacles to overcome, choices to be made, and a business to manage. But as I gazed at my small family, Amy, Dad, and Grandma, I realized that we could overcome anything as a team.